Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our International Women's Day 2021 Business Talk episode today. I would like to start by congratulating all the women and men that believe in equity, because I believe today is not for women only, but for all of us. As we know, International Women's Day is over 100 years old, and it has started with a gathering in 1911 that was supported with over 1 million of people. Today, it belongs to all groups collectively everywhere. So it's not a country, it's not a group, it's not an organization specific, but it's really inclusivity of all of us. Welcome to today's episode, and welcome to Choose to Challenge. I'm very privileged to have such a great panelist with us today. We have a very nice, diversified, so we're really walking the talk in terms of bringing the diversity, inclusivity, and belonging into this conversation. I would like to welcome Ms. Rola, the CEO of Standard Chartered UAE. So we're very great to have Ms. Rola Abu Manneh with us, who is representing the financial sector, the leadership in terms of business and corporate and Fortune 500, the Middle Eastern perspective, if you will, a mother and a family CEO as well as a bank CEO. So welcome, Ms. Rola. Also, we have with us Mr. Frederic, who is the Medtronic Vice President of HR EMEA. And this is to prove my point correct, that today is for all of us, not only for women. And thank you for being the man who believes in this cause and contributing as an individual, as an organization, as all the different roles that you have in life where you are applying the value system that you believe in. Least, I don't want to say the least, but the most exciting, I would say, having with us the youth, the energetic, the challenging, the multi-talented, multicultural Bushra, the youngest Muslim official elected in the US, as well as having a day's job, be it Google. We're very, very happy to have you with us, Bushra. So I would love for each one of you to give us a quick introduction. Would you like to start, Rola, please?
Thank you, Nairouz, and thank you really for inviting me today on such a prestigious panel. And I have a very happy Women's International Day for all of us. My name is Rola Abu Manneh, and I'm the CEO for Standard Chartered Bank in the UAE. I have been with Standard Chartered for just under 3 years. And as they say, time flies when you're having fun. I have overall 26 years of banking experience. Previous to Standard Chartered, I used to be in First Abu Dhabi Bank, where I had a great career there as one of the senior Emiratis there. I was, when I joined Standard Chartered, I was the first Emirati to to lead a bank, and yet an international bank. And as you would know, and we will discuss in this panel, when it comes to banking sector, there are very few women in banking sector at a very senior level, and this is something that we are always very keen to have more of. So, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you and welcome. Frederic, would you like to go next and tell us your story?
Sure. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Nairouz, thank you for the opportunity to be part of that panel with such distinguished speakers. I'm probably the underrepresented minority today, as a Western European, white Caucasian male, I suppose.
Finally, it's lovely to have, such a.
Let's say that I'm here as part of the, the men advocating change, right? Which is also part of our structure. Maybe I'll say a word about that. But, my name is Frederic VAN MULLEM. I work for Medtronic, which is, one of the, healthcare technology leader in the market. Fairly large corporation whose strategy with respect to inclusion, diversity, and equity is very, very strong and very prominent. I'm in charge of human resources for the EMEA region of Medtronic, which in total represents approximately about 18,000 people, and based out of Switzerland, in beautiful Switzerland, and very, very happy to be here. Personally, I'm married. I got three big boys. And I've been in the HR function for nearly 30 years now, in various capacity, multiple regions, and pretty much all functional areas of human resources. So very pleased to be here.
Very happy to have you with us. Thank you for sparing the time to speak to us today. Bushra, everybody's waiting to hear about you and your background. So please tell us about the exciting journey that you have and who you are.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Bushra Amiwala. I am so excited to be here today among such amazing panelists, and I can't wait to learn from each and every one of you. And thank you to our host for having us today. As I mentioned, my name is Bushra. I am based out of Chicago, Illinois, so it is the morning time right now. And I actually am an elected official, and I also, outside of that, work at Google. And I'm just getting started into my career, my journey, and what's all that has to come. I graduated from DePaul University in class of 2020. So graduated amidst a global pandemic, which is something that is an experience like no other. And I was actually the commencement speaker as well, which was unfortunately also just a YouTube video. And again, super excited to be here today. I'm excited to talk about my both runs for office. I lost the first time, ran the second time, and won. So I'll have that story of failure and resilience. And then also would love to talk about my role at Google and how that shaped me both personally and professionally. So thank you all for having me.
We're very excited to have you. Thank you so much, Bushra. So, starting to talk about the effect of COVID and the pandemic, as we all know that it has left millions of women jobless and some others considering joblessness, if we may say, because of the mounting pressure that has been affecting their physical, family, mental, all the different aspects. And speaking about today's theme, that we are talking about women in leadership achieving an equal future in a COVID world. So we have all these, if you will, challenges that we would like to tackle and take your opinion about and see if you have a magic wand for us in terms of solution and going forward. So starting by Rola, I would love to hear from you about your journey to where you are today and what got you here. What have been your greatest achievements of overcoming gender bias challenges?
Thank you, Nairouz. So over the course of my career, I've been fortunate to make meaningful contributions to the industry and community in both at a personal and professional capacity. And these experiences have underlined my dedication to further contribute to the development of Standard Chartered in the UAE since I joined the bank under 3 years ago. So in my opinion, a major barrier to female leadership in any corporate settings globally has been really the organizational structure. And throughout my career, I've always focused on business outcomes, open communication, and confidence. This thinking really has led me to effectively oversee this massive workforce of an international bank in the UAE, and a responsibility I'm more than happy to have undertaken. Institutional mindsets are another significant barrier and are a major reason that we don't see more women at the top level of leadership. Because people make assumptions about women at work and as leaders based on their stereotypical roles in society. So often women are limited in their advancement, or worse, never given an opportunity because of bias. Lastly, I think it's not enough to be in a certain role or have a seat at the table. One must also surround themselves with allies, both males and females. And also, one should always speak confidently, regardless of the odds faced. So at times, women leaders may fear being criticized or rejected. However, respect really comes from one's voice if heard. So it's very important to make our presence known as a leader and collaborator for good. And this is really, I've used all these techniques throughout my journey. And while facing challenges, obviously, but you never let any of these challenges, stop you from growing your career.
Thank you, Rola. Wonderful insight. How about you, Bushra? From your end, what have been your challenges and how you were able to overcome any bias, if that was the case? And I would assume it was more so the case, especially running for an office.
Yeah, so I think what's really interesting is that in the United States, we have the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And growing up, I was aligned with one party just based on what my parents shared and that showcased. But I realized that I had preconceived notions and unconscious biases for what it meant to be a Republican. I didn't understand what those key issues were, what people cared about, what those causes were. So I wanted to get a firsthand look of what it meant to be a Republican. So I decided to work for the most powerful Republican in the state of Illinois at the time, our U.S. Senator Mark Kirk. And while working on his campaign, I was given the task to go door to door to various registered Republican voters' homes and ask them a series of 5 questions. And later they would shape policy around the answers to those questions. So for example, I would ask his constituents, do you like chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream? All of them would say chocolate. And then Mark Kirk would also say, we support chocolate ice cream, right? Just like a silly example for how that looks like when it's boiled down to its core. So what's interesting is that when I was working on that campaign, the first question on that list was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how fearsome are you of an Islamic terror attack on U.S. soil?
Oh, wow.
And that was literally the first question we had to ask. And I'm someone who wears a hijab. I'm visibly outwardly Muslim. So it was a very uncomfortable experience, not only for me, but for the people at the door when I would ask this question. People would honestly laugh because they would be so uncomfortable by this. But they'd also be uncomfortable because their response would be 10. Very fearsome. And me standing at their front porch wasn't helping. So as I went door to door, I realized and saw this trend and pattern and inserted question number 1.5, which was, why? Because when else will I have the opportunity to talk to someone who not only is fundamentally disagrees with me, but is scared of me? And after asking why, people would say, well, you're the first Muslim person I've ever met, which probably was not true, but I was probably the first visibly, outwardly displaying Muslim person they met. And I realized that the best way to combat unconscious beliefs and predisposed and preconceived notions is to be the counterexample, right? To be the example that sets that apart for other ways. So that's one of the main influencing and guiding principles that led me to later run for office. And it was someone on that campaign that saw leadership ability and potential in me that I didn't see in myself at the time. And they're the ones who asked me to run for office.
Wonderful, and congratulations on all what you've done, and truly you're an inspiration to all of us. Frederic, Rola mentioned that a biggest, if you will, chunk of the responsibility is really on the corporate and organization, and that how you build the organization structure, how you build your culture. This is how you can enable attraction, retention, and inclusion, belonging, etc. Will you be able to give us some insight into specifically related to the difficult times that we're living during COVID? What type of agile strategy and adjustment in the workplace, in your opinion, is needed to lessen the COVID impact on women nowadays?
Well, thank you, Nairouz and Rola, for your intervention. I think you named it. I think inclusion, diversity, or gender diversity is something where corporations need to be intentional. And if I look at Medtronic, I think COVID has had no impact on our commitment to building a diverse and inclusive workplace. Inclusion, diversity, equity is and remains at the heart of our strategy as a corporation. And I would even say that during the pandemic, we probably put even more rigor into this work than ever before. Medtronic is a company that has always very much valued and makes it a point to listen to its female employees and leaders. We have a Medtronic so-called, employee resource group. So Medtronic Women Network, which is, 15,000 members strong with hubs and presence in about 68 countries. So it's a pretty prominent network. We call that our network at Medtronic. And look, we've engaged with them very early on in the pandemic. As many companies, we were confronted to, kind of the urgency of finding solutions for a number of constraints, very often affecting women, probably more so than men in many cases. And, we've worked very closely with the Women Network to develop and deploy a number of, programs, initiatives, training, support mechanism that we're really focusing on alleviating as much as possible the constraints put, on women especially, who, more often than men, probably, I think it's fair to say, are confronted to bigger challenges, either when working from home and having to cope with, work and household and children, sometimes elderly parents, but also for those women in our company who had to be physically at work in manufacturing or operations or distribution, while school were closed, for instance, right? So we've deployed a number of, programs, initiatives, such as, just to give you a few examples, flexible working time, and rendering all people leaders very attentive to the need of, dealing with the circumstance and recognizing that not everyone, sits in the same place, is confronted the same needs. We've rolled out and sponsored, childcare support, both in terms of resource, but also financially. We've, extended our family care program, for instance, which provides for additional paid time off for, enabling parents, men and women for that matter, to deal with a variety of situations, whether it's, military duty or kids out of school or taking care of a disabled or sick relatives, which has paid off. We've also deployed a number of well-being, wellness kind of, online training, always with that focus on making sure that people can keep a healthy work balance. We've expanded, for instance, also the unconscious bias training, which is something we've made not mandatory, but strongly encouraged for all of our people leaders, as a way to make them really attentive to the needs of women in particular in this part, in this context. And as I said, we have that Men Advocating Change group, which has also been very active in really helping the Medtronic Women Network to achieve its vision, which is to really enable a world where women can lead with equal opportunity. But aside from all of these programs, as Rola pointed out, I think it's really mindset questions. I think I've been working for a variety of multinational companies over the years, and whereas inclusion diversity is a topic that really surfaced over the last few years more so than previously, you can really sense the difference between companies, right? I mean, there are still many corporations, I believe, where inclusion diversity is a pious wish, or something that we talk about, but not always followed by concrete and tangible actions. And if I look back at Medtronic over the last 12 months or so, thanks, I believe, among other, to all of these programs and support mechanisms we put in place, we have not seen more attrition, for women than for men, compared to the previous stage. We've actually achieved in 2020 or gender diversity goals, which was to have at a minimum 40% of women in manager and above, type of positions, and 32% of female in VP level positions. And we've also been recognized through the Catalyst Award, which is one of those awards that recognizes companies who kind of advance women in. So, I would say that COVID has not really stopped our efforts. It has probably heightened the need to probably put more emphasis on certain, often underrepresented minorities, and really give them the tool for equal opportunity.
Yeah, and I have, to praise you really, Frederic and Medtronic, from our experience working in executive search for 20 years. It was like a dream come true working with Medtronic, because we really found finally the client that walked the talk and truly applying the value system in place. And I have to tell you, it's been really a pleasure every time we're talking to a candidate, attracting them to Medtronic. Something that has been very common as a feedback, where people would say, oh, Medtronic, they treat their people really well. So, kudos to whatever you've been doing. It has been really working remarkably well.
Well, we're not perfect, but we're trying hard. And Medtronic is one of those companies that I believe walks the talk to a very large extent, and puts the meaning behind the strategy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So keep doing what you're doing. It's really working. Thank you so much. Bushra, let's go back to a spicy topic. Let's talk about the hijab and your challenge. Usually policies, ideas of women candidates are often overlooked or replaced by hyper focus on appearance. And, touching on what you just said earlier, let's really put the elephant on the table and talk about how did this specific challenge challenged you, and how you were able to overcome it. Because that's truly, I can tell you, I'm a Muslim, I don't put in hijab. I used to go for a global board meeting in New York for over 10 years. And every single year, someone will come to me and tell me, you must feel very happy that you can dress like this now here. And then, I had to explain to them that I'm not forced to dress any other way wherever I'm coming from. So I'm really interested to hear about your journey from that aspect. I don't want to call it challenge, but the spicy journey, let's put it this way.
Absolutely. So I began wearing the hijab when I was a freshman in high school. So I was about 13 years old, and when I started, I only decided to wear it part-time. So I would wear it in some settings and not wear it in others. I would wear it I would be very consistent. So I'd wear it to school, and I wouldn't wear it when hanging out with friends. And I went to a high school where right across the street, there was a very big mall. So after school, we would go to the mall, and I would take the hijab off. So with that, I was able to directly compare the differences in treatment from when I had the hijab on versus when I did not have the hijab on. And it made me realize that this isn't something that was in my head. It's not me overthinking something, but it actually was the true differences in treatment from when I had the hijab on versus when I did not have it on, which I thought was very interesting. And then apart from that, no one in my family wore the hijab. So when I began wearing it, something that brought a lot of nervousness and hypertension and things of that sort to my family, but they were really concerned overall for my safety. And when I was running for office, I realized as women, similar to what you just mentioned, tend to be reduced to their clothing and their appearances. And as a Muslim woman who wears a hijab, being reduced to my identity meant the inability to see beyond my religion. Right. Mm-hmm. That's all that people would talk about. People would say the Muslim teenager running for office, or, the Muslim girl who's now making strides in the political sphere. But no one knew my name. Because to everyone, I was just that. I was the Muslim girl and nothing more. And what's interesting is that every single time I was in the hyper focus and lens in the media when people would want to focus in on what I was wearing. So for example, there was a debate between my two male opponents and I, and there was a newspaper that highlighted that debate afterwards. And it talked about the two policy ideas that each male opponent presented. And it said, and Bushra Amiwala wore a stylish light pink hijab to the forum. And that is all it said about me. And another example is I wore a red dress to my fundraising dinner. I had 350 people that attended. There were so many folks that came. It was a very inspiring event. But the next day, people said red dress means Republican. As if I'm trying to send subliminal messaging through my clothing. Like red is like my color. Like I wear it often, like as if I'm trying to showcase like what my underlying beliefs or values are because of that. I think it's ridiculous. And I think it sounds even worse if someone were to say like, oh, and this man wore a blue tie. Like, no one says that. Yet for some reason, we've accepted this notion for women. So I think the inherent sexism that lies becomes very clear, especially in politics and in the media. And unfortunately, that's where the struggle for me has been.
Well done for you, and thank you for being assertive and courageous. And yes, keep on doing it. And I hope it will never jeopardize your safety. Rola, let's move from the fashion part and talk about the hardcore business. So from your experience nowadays, with the COVID-19 crisis, what type of discussions you've been engaged in at a board level? Do you see that it has been clearly identified discussion from a strategic point of view when we're talking about pressure from a gender differentiative point of view? Is there a different type of pressure that women are going under versus men during COVID?
Thank you, Nairouz. So gender equality has been in the headlines and in our hearts for decades, whether at home or in the office. And we have seen women fighting for their right to be heard, to be included, and to have an equal opportunity. But despite the significant progress in this regard, we have hit a bump in the road to equality, which is the onset of COVID-19. So the pandemic has hindered the ability of women across the globe to progress in their workforce, effectively erasing some years of reforms aimed at ensuring equal opportunity and gender parity in the corporate sector. So, like a research from McKinsey shows that women's jobs are 1.8 times more vulnerable to the COVID crisis than their male counterparts. If not immediately and adequately addressed, this will result in a $1 trillion reduction in the global GDP over the next decade. However, if appropriate action is taken against this inequity, an estimated $13 trillion could be added to global GDP by the same time frame. So financial institutions can and have gone beyond any government initiatives and implemented their own gender parity plans. And Standard Chartered, for example, has put its own plans in place and says, and we are committed right from the top, from the board all the way down the institution, to making progress on gender diversity group-wise. And the value of female participation provides to the corporate sector as well as the wider economy has been really underlined in the light of the pandemic. So as such, an increased focus should be placed on bolstering gender equity in the workplace, and in the interest of advancing the state of gender equality, it is time really for corporates to be held responsible and champion an equitable environment for men and women. And we in the bank have taken, diversity and inclusion for us, it's a 5-year journey, which have started a long time back. And we have it from, we have a global diversity and inclusion panel, committee, and each of our countries has diversity and inclusion. And the CEOs of the countries chair it. So it's very much part of the DNA of the bank.
But don't you think, due to the unique COVID challenges, that these strategies needs to be more dynamic, and that there need to be more agility in terms of how we can adapt it to the current need, which nobody ever predicted that we could have, right?
So, yes, for sure. If you look at it, with now working from home, while the women have been affected in general with the pandemic, but at the same time, working from home will give an opportunity for women, more job offers, ability to be home and manage the family, as well as manage, basically, do their work. If we look at what COVID fast-tracked is digitization and technology advancement, and this is where we would like to see more women in this space, because that's while technology will reduce some basically the employment, but it will also require more reskills in certain area, and this is an opportunity we see for women.
Sure.
So in a way, it is really, while it's more about the women finding their place and their comfort zone in the world we are in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Frederic, speaking about board and, women to be able to become board ready, what does it take and what is your advice for us as women so that we can be board ready?
Well, look, I think it's fairly obvious when you look at all the studies, and Rola was referring to a McKinsey study. It's clear that corporate boards are under pressure today to diversify their ranks and add some new members, more women, more minorities, representing different cultural, functional backgrounds. I think in general the bar to become kind of board material, so to speak, or the requirements is not really different between men and women. I think what is required is to have financial acumen, not being a CFO, but being able at least to read and interpret an income statement, a balance sheet, being strategic, meaning being able to ask the right questions, and to ask the smart questions around the marketplace, disrupting technologies, competition, but also other matters like environment, corporate citizenship, or governance matters. What I believe, however, is what probably presents an additional challenge for women is the relationship part, right? I mean, when you're about to move into a board, you're moving from being kind of an operator to becoming kind of an advisor or coach, or somebody who encourages or kind of try to steer the agenda. And I think what you observe very often is that women who are still to a large extent underrepresented in board of directors, right? I think the numbers you see is ranging somewhere from 15 to 25% in the best case. I think if I look at Medtronic's board, we have 3 women out of 12 members, so about 25%. We as a company, not necessarily as far as the board is concerned, but more generally, we want to be representative of the society. And if you look at the world population, it's about 50-50, right? So at the end of the day, that's what the kind of representation we should be seeing in just all instances of companies. And but as I said, board of directors, sometimes may feel that they are, disrupting the old boys network, the old boys club, and it can be quite intimidating, and therefore, I think, certainly a piece of advice or something you heard very often is it's even more important for women to build very strong relationships, especially with the man on the board, but also the executive at the companies. You do a bit of self-promotion because I think women have, typically, that's not universal as a rule, but, usually have somewhat more emotional intelligence and less ego. And they often don't want to appear as the one, bragging about their presence on the board and so forth. And when you look at studies or when you talk to women about board readiness, what you hear very often is, to a certain extent, a lack of self-confidence. Women tend to, not always believe that they are as legitimate as men to be on board of directors, and tend to, to an extent, I would say it's a self-imposed glass ceiling, where women often feels less legitimate than men, and therefore, I think in terms of advice, I think it's important that you pick the right board, the right company, or the right industry. One where you can connect with the business, you can connect with the strategy. Probably also a company that stands out in terms of its inclusion and diversity strategy or commitment. More generally. As I said, do a bit of self-promotion. And try to overcome that feeling, that self-imposed glass ceiling to a certain extent. Certainly build a very diverse network, especially with men. both at the board level and below the board level. And I think I would say probably it's important that women feel comfortable sometimes being the only woman on the board, or at least being part of a underrepresented minority on the board. So, but the responsibility for corporations is to really, and that's where we driving, is to provide women not only opportunities within the company, but also look at how we are going to enable acquiring those experiences on the financial, on the strategic side, on the relationship side. So giving them kind of a general management responsibilities to really enable that board transition.
But we need to accelerate that, because also we want to be able to include the youth on the boardroom, right? I mean, you and I, we talked about this, I was going to say last year, no, it's almost 2 years ago now, when you were talking about the importance of diversity, and you tackled not only gender and ethnicity, etc., but also the youth. So yes. Bushra, youth, talking about your point of view and your definition of leadership. You have your own leadership, if you will, slogan that you call it everyday leader. So can you tell us what does that mean, and how is this applicable in our COVID times?
Absolutely. So before I delve into that, I just want to say, Frederic, thank you so much for all of your points. And I would just quickly add on just a small staple to what he said. I think diversity is about faces, and I think its inclusion is about voices. And I think sometimes you have the face level diversity, which may or may not be enough, but I think that's something I want to quickly share. But that's why equity should be at the core and forefront of everything that we do. And then when it comes to everyday leadership, it's like a term that I coined. I don't know if it's just pertinent to me or not, but it's the idea that we should be leaders in our everyday spheres of influences, in our social circles like that. And sometimes we have made leadership something greater than ourselves. We've made it something bigger than who we actually are. We've made it unattainable to what we actually can do from a day-to-day perspective. But it's those everyday instances that remind us that we also are capable of being leaders in our own spheres of influences and social circles, whether it be enacting and enabling change in there, or also bringing others onto the table with us. And I think an example of this everyday leadership, it's not the extraordinary things that one may do, but it's those everyday little instances. So for example, every time I'm invited to speak at an event or attend a conference or something like that, I ask if I can have 5 free tickets, or if it's a free event, then I share the link anyways, and ask if there are 5 additional people I can bring along with me. And then I put that on my social media, and I bring 5 other young girls or young Muslim women or young people or whatever that diverse background or subsect may be to the table as well, because I don't want to be the only Muslim woman in the room. I don't want to be the only woman in the room, and I don't want to be the only young person in the room. So what can I do to change that? It's to bring others along with me. And that's, I think, a key core tenet and example of everyday leadership.
I can help you on the woman and on the Muslim, but the old, I'm sorry, I don't think I can change that.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much, Bushra. Wonderful insight. Rola, let's go back in time during your journey and share with us what really was, if you will, what triggered in you and propelled you then to be a game changer for women in C-suite and in the boardroom.
So that's going back many years, Nairouz, for that. Now you make me feel so old. So really, throughout my career,
not only me, every time I speak to Bushra, I really feel horrible. I feel I'm very, very old. So please help me out here.
I know, but it is so, it's really nice to be surrounded by youth and by somebody like Bushra. So, Nairouz, throughout my career, really, I've championed women empowerment and female entrepreneurship to ensure that women are given the opportunity to pursue their ambitions and to make a mark on their preferred sectors. I mean, we do this for the young youth coming, for our daughters as well, what we're doing now. And I'm very committed to supporting the wider community by providing mentorship programs in collaboration with leading partners, which aim to prepare participants with the necessary skills to succeed in their chosen professions, really. So and then at the bank, we take really gender equality very seriously, and we believe that inclusion is our organizational strength. And this is derived from our brand promise, here for good. So the bank has already placed a tremendous focus on ensuring men and women are seen as equals across the board, be it through onboarding, from the onboarding process, compensation, opportunity, or representation. And I have worked diligently to mirror this commitment across our UAE operation, really to inspire a culture of inclusion and ignite further progress in the countries of the UAE's ongoing gender equality efforts. So we work a lot on this in line with the UAE's strategy and with certain government entities as well. And this commitment has materialized in several initiatives, so which look to not only equip women with essential businesses, but to provide them with valuable opportunities for investment. So what we've done is basically the way we look at it is it's a journey for the women, starting from a program we have called GOAL, which we run globally, which is mentoring and educating young girls at school and talking to them about their future. And we believe it's done by giving them confidence at a young age. Similarly, in university, we mentor students in universities. We go and talk about finance in universities, given that because finance is a very much male-dominated area, and we want to bring more and more females at senior level in the banking industry. And then the last, basically, stage of life would be what we created, Women in Tech, which is supporting entrepreneur women through their, through accelerator programs, which aims to educate and enlighten and finance female-found startups in the UAE. So we're constantly prioritizing these policies.
Absolutely, and this is where we first met during the Accelerate Her program, which is a program to support startups in fintech here at the DIFC, and remarkable work what you have done there as well, Rola. Thank you. Rola mentioned inclusivity. So can you please tell us what inclusive leaders look like in action?
Sure, and I'd like to, commend what, Bushra and Rola's statement about, inclusion, diversity being broader than just gender, right? I think that's so very important. We in the EMEA region, we have articulated our, inclusion, diversity, and equity strategy around, those 5 pillars: gender, generation, disability, origin, not to say ethnicity, and sexual orientation. And origin is really around trying to represent the society we live in. So you go, for instance, to Germany, there is a substantial portion of the population that's from Turkish origin. Well, we should be reflecting that, among other. To answer your question, I think, inclusive leaders are, those who are, first of all, very much aware of their own bias and their own preferences, to start with, and who are actively going to seek different perspectives, different viewpoints, and who truly believe that this informs better decision-making. And, that's really the, I would say the fundamentals of our, inclusion and diversity strategy at Medtronic, among other. How do you see that? I mean, people who exercise self-awareness, people who also are vocal and verbalize their commitment to inclusion and diversity. I think that's something that we somehow sometimes underestimate. It's not just word on a piece of paper on a website. Yeah. It needs something that needs to be really cascaded through the organization. We're asking of all leaders to not only be inclusive leaders, but also assess their teams and their leaders in their organization to be inclusive leaders. We try to make them understand that, if you want to be credible as an inclusive leader, you need to be authentic. You need to, come across as really truly believing, what you're saying. and displaying, the level of integrity and dependability. In other words, your accountability is not just, accountability on paper, but something that you live, day in, day out. And, we've made it a point at Medtronic to try to include those diversity items beyond our strategy. That's something that's truly embedded into our performance management system, for instance, into hiring strategy, into our talent management processes, where people are not just signing up for the typical what goals, like meeting your budget or X many percent, that type of stuff. But we have also what we call the how goals. The how goals is how you behave within the company, and that we require from all of the vice presidents and certainly director, senior director levels, that they put into their objectives some goals that are absolutely specific to inclusion and diversity, and those are objectives that are truly monitored and measured. It's not just, again, kind of a very pious wish, so to speak, but something that can be tracked, that can be monitored, and that really drives the performance assessments of many leaders. That's also something that we survey at least twice a year, through organization health survey, where the engagement, but also inclusion and metrics are being tracked and monitored, and remedy when we are below the target. So it's really kind of a mindset and something that we are looking after very prominently, especially with male leaders at Medtronic.
Great insights. Thank you. I think now, is there any other point you would like to add or challenge one another? Please, let's open the floor. We're going to open the floor for Q&As from our audience. But if you'd like to ask any question as well, please feel free, or if you'd like to add any comment.
No, I think, Nairouz, I agree with Frederic. It's also on us as women, to put our hand up and have that confidence and to earn that seat at the table. And that's why you will see, if you look at the finance sector, you'll see it is 50-50, women and men. But as you move up the ladder, it gets the percentage of women get less. It's just because women in general, they will. And we have it in us. We believe in teamwork. We don't have the ego. But sometimes it is important, because we would only put up our hands up and apply for a job if we know we can do 100% of it. Whereas our male colleagues would maybe do 50% and yet apply, because the rest of the other 50 is on the job learning. And this is where I would say we need to learn these traits from our male colleagues, because we have to put ourselves forward and believe in ourselves.
Thank you.
More. I think you're spot on, Rola, right? I mean, it shouldn't be the case that women have to self-promote to a certain extent, but that's a reality. And I think what really makes a difference is companies that are truly intentional in their efforts to build a diverse workforce, right? And it does require some significant investment in terms of resource, in terms of money, in terms of time that you dedicate to that, from the very top management of the company, and it needs to be monitored. If you as the say goes, right? I mean, what gets measured gets done. And that's very true. And sometimes you need to go through some quota, even though you could question whether quota, is the right answer, but it probably is from time to time to at least sparkle, those initiatives and get companies to realize that you have a lot to gain from, being a diverse and really embracing multiple perspective, across the organization. And that's something we really try to promote at all levels. Individually, that's really kind of, the type of inclusive leaders that we want to see. collectively in how we, shape some of our process or programs. We talked about acquisition, and that's how we start our partnership, with Envision. Nairouz, as you remember, is that you help us really build up slates where we have at least a certain amount of women candidates for every single job, especially for the top jobs. And we are not considering a slate that does not include women.
Exactly.
That's the same when it comes to succession plan. That's the same when it comes to promotion. Be very intentional. And then, as Rola said, it's also a matter of supporting communities. That's something that we try to do as well. It's to support all actions that are promoting economical development for women and more generally for underrepresented minorities. And I think you got to be all encompassing in that effort.
Absolutely, and I have to say, actually earlier today morning, we really touched on Medtronic's story because we had a client that they aspire to have a strong female P&L commercial head, but the attitude and behavior that they do not exist. And we've always been suffering almost for the last 20 years from the perception that women do not exist in a commercial leadership role. And we had this conversation, and I remember, when we started with you, and you believe that if we dig hard, we will find them. Yes, we may not find people at the first layer, but keep on digging. And Rola, like what you said, women don't tend to promote themselves. We don't speak up. We don't go on social media. We don't apply for jobs if we don't think we are 120% capable. So all this really jeopardizes our chances of being seen. And that's why it's our responsibility as executive search professionals or anybody who works, in the HR field, to go the extra mile to make sure that we can really skin all the layers, because women do exist in all capacity, in all sectors, in all countries. We just need to work harder to be able to find them. Now, we have a question from Chris, and whomever would like to answer this question. Chris saying, I'm most concerned about gender inequality. We are most committed as men, but how do we empower ourselves more and enjoy equal rights in the workplace? I think, Frederic, you're born to answer such a question. I mean, being the HR, the male in the room.
Right. Well, yeah. And as you pointed out, I think we have a role to play, as men, and we have that mechanism. I think it's probably all the large companies that are taking inclusion, diversity seriously have that. Is the men advocating change, right? So we are rallying. That's not a source group per se, but that's what you would typically qualify as an ally group, which is very powerful, because that's where you really engage, the senior leadership, male leadership, in advocating for that change. And it does not remain just a kind of a, CEO type, street talk, but it's something that, spreading very widely throughout the company, throughout the corporation. This beyond obviously pursuing some very specific objectives, like pay equity, which we, if you look at the US, we are 100% pay equity and 99% when it comes to the rest of the world. And we continuously look into this and, make sure that we get a portion of our, for instance, merit adjustment budget to kind of restore those inequality when they exist. So again, it's all about being very intentional. And aside from that, it's not that rocket science. There's a lot of very small practical things that you can put in place that will really advance, women in leadership. And then, as you pointed out, it's true that very often, it's been harder to find women in commercial roles. If I look at my HR organization, it's probably 80% female. If I look at our finance organization, it's probably around the 60%. If you look at commercial roles, that's another story. We're probably down to the board levels of, somewhere around 25%, maybe 30%. But that's a challenge. Same for R&D, same for operations. So, certain businesses are probably somewhat more prone to having more women in their ranks, in their leadership, versus the traditional, metal industry or hardcore industry. Those industries are typically facing more challenges. And that's why you see, programs that are either targeting women in sales or women in R&D or women in operations. And those are valid programs, because it's all about, providing equal opportunity and also preparing women for, bigger roles by making sure they can acquire, a variety of skills in different functional areas. So I don't know if I answered the question, but.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Huda is asking, one of the best strategies for companies is ensure current leaders take responsibility in helping to lift women up. Do you think you take actions and decisions of leaders at your organization were fair and inclusive in promoting and encouraging you as a woman? I think you've already answered that, but if there's anything, both of you, Rola and Frederic. How about you, Bushra? Does this apply to Google? Let's hear your point of view.
Yeah, so I've been at Google for only 6 months, and I would admit I'm at the bottom of the totem pole at Google. I'm just an associate right now, but in my opinion, I think that they have done a stellar job being inclusive. And today was actually in honor of International Women's Day. They had a live stream with Viola Davis, and I was one of the speakers as well. And I think them seeing that leadership ability and potential in me that I guess I sometimes still don't see in myself at the time, they really went above and beyond to uplift and inspire my voice. And it didn't matter to them that I was someone who was kind of still just an associate or anything like that. I'm not a VP or a director or, a manager or anything of that sort. Yet the idea of inclusion is embodied and emulated in those traits and in those opportunities. So I find that Google has done a stellar job. And I think when it comes to that promotion aspect, I feel like I can't comment on that just yet, but I will admit my manager is a woman and her director is a woman too. So just speaking from that regard, I think it's very fascinating that in the hierarchy we have women in all roles of that. So I think that that's inclusion at its finest.
Thank you. Another question: do you think actions and decisions of leaders of your organization? Oh, this is the same question. Sorry, we've answered that. All right. What will change due to this learning? Essentially, interesting. Would there be? Yes, please go ahead.
What learning? Is it the COVID experience or the?
I assume. Okay, here we go. We have an explanation. So, have you managed to see the way forward in a change of leadership traits and development due to your focus?
Yes, clearly, right. I think I think we all come with our own bias, conscious or unconscious, right? And that's something you have to undo if you want to make, progress. As I said, and to risk of sounding like a broken record, but it has to be intentional by the company. That needs to be lived from the very top of the corporation and translate into concrete actions, programs, metrics, you name it. And over time, you start seeing indeed, behavior change. There are some behaviors that we will simply not tolerate. If you go back, 10, 20 years, gravelous jokes and that type of stuff, where probably, that's okay, he didn't mean that way, But those are the kind of things that we pay special attention to, and that does influence, behaviors over time. Absolutely.
Thank you. Rola, question about Standard Chartered. Is there any specific focus or change in your gender equality programs because of COVID? Also, we touched on this, but if there's anything you'd like to add, would be great.
I think it's more emphasis because, it's a journey for us, and it's already part of the DNA in our policies, processes, and we've moved beyond diversity. It's inclusiveness. So just to give you, our board is 30% women. It's increasing to 36% by this year. 14 of our markets, we have female CEOs, apart from myself. We already have set new targets of 35% female representation in senior roles by 2024. So we're taking all these initiatives, but we've increased the maternity leave from 90 days to 140 calendar days. Similarly, we've increased the paternity leave to 10 days. So we're really enforcing it. And to us, you know, what in COVID we did was really more, I would say, more focus is the wellness of our employees. And that is not only women, it's men and women. And this is something that I think going forward, while we already had a wellness program for our employees internally, but we're re-emphasizing it more. We're already, as a bank, moving to future of work now, where we will have a hybrid model. We had flexible working hours, but staff will be able to select how many days they work from home, how many days they work from office. So this is an opportunity more for women, because it gives them a chance, you know, to manage their home as well as, you know, managing their office. But it's more these, I would say, whatever we have already, we're enhancing it more around inclusiveness.
Thank you. I would love to thank all the audience for all the contribution. I don't want to stop you from having more questions, but unfortunately we ran out of time. So please post your questions and we will ensure to address it to our panelists and get back to you with answers. The last question we have is about any traits, skills, new traits, new leadership attributes that you have found or that you have put in place now post-COVID. Is there any changes in terms of what are you looking for in a leadership?
I would say, Nairouz, if I can take, it's being nimble, agile, and resilient. It is very important that we look for our employees, whether new or existing, they have to be really agile and resilient, because this is what COVID has taught us. Digitally tech savvy, these are important traits, because this is the future that we see, and especially with the youth. And we have seen, if you look at the current youth, they're tech savvy, they're confident, you know, and they know what they want. And we see it from our interactions from university students. But following your passion, believing what you want to do, you should always enjoy, you know, your job. I used to always tell my employees, if you don't come to office if you're not enjoying your job, don't bother. You spend half of your day here, or more than half of your day, so you really have to enjoy what you're doing.
Absolutely. Can I ask each one of you to give us a last, if you will, words of wisdom that you would love to leave us with? Anything that you'd like to tell us before we say goodbye?
I can.
The minority? Yeah, go ahead, Bushra.
Oh, sure. Sorry about that. Thank you. The real quick, I would just say always shy away from being a token. Don't be a token in the room, but be a connector. Be someone who brings others with you and brings along. A token is someone who's the only blank in the room, and avoid that at all costs. Try to be a connector that brings others with you, and hopefully uplifting and inspiring others is the way to go.
Wonderful advice. Thank you. Frederic?
Well, I would say, you know, as I said before, I think if you look at the worldwide population, it's about 50-50. So, you know, that's what we need to strive for. And I think, you know, women should feel as legitimate as men to, you know, accomplish or, you know, be in positions of responsibilities. So I think just, you know, believe in yourself, because even though, you know, often the, you know, the traditional model is, you know, daddy at work and mom at home, you know, is still true to a certain extent, but that should not prevent, you know, from considering that, you know, these type of jobs are just as important as, you know, bringing money on, you know, on the table every month. So I think self-confidence, self-promotion, and being intentional, you know, as a company, as an organization, whatever it is, profit or non-profit, is the key to getting us to a true, inclusive and diverse workplace and society more generally.
I would say, Nairouz, aim to break the glass ceiling, because once broken, there's no going back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, our dear guest, for this illuminating and rich discussion. Your inspiration, stories, and profound insights were treasured and very enlightening. I greatly appreciate your valuable time and efforts to share your practical knowledge and personal life-changing stories. Looking forward to having you in more talks soon, inshallah. As for our audience tonight or this morning, depending where you are joining us from, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the talk as we did. And please let us know in the comments in our Facebook page, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever you like, any comment, any questions. And as I mentioned, we'll ensure that we will send them to the panelists and get back to you. I'm really hopeful that one day we will reach equity and we don't need to have a Women's Day to celebrate, because we would be all celebrating all year round. Thank you so much and have a lovely day. And
Thank you.
good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Goodbye.